Hey there, fans. Welcome to another episode of Tampa Bay Cop Talk. We've got rambling rivals for you as we bring you an opposing voice to get you ready for the City game coming up at the weekend. I'm Darius Thigpen, and we've got Jon Ashley of Maine Road Ramble joining us today. Well, Jon, we're here in Tampa, so got to ask for the rest of the nation, how's the weather where you are?
We had 5.5 inches of snow on Friday, but that's all gone now. But yeah, it was. I think it's like feels like about 23 out there right now. It's pretty chilly for this time of year, even for us. But Massachusetts has four seasons, and I think I'd rather have that. I went to Miami for the Premier League Mornings event last December, and I loved being away from the snow for a while. But I think I would get bored of the sun. But that might be my Mancunian complexion.
I think it's nice to miss it every now and again, but for me, I'm like on the opposite end. It's like it's nice to visit the snow. Living in it, I've been there, done that. So
That's fair.
Jon, let's go ahead and get started with this as we look at the recent rivalry between Liverpool and Manchester City. So there have been some huge games between these two teams just in the last few years. You go back to the 2017-18 season where Sadio Mane decides he's going to try to take a chunk out of Ederson, and that goes well for Liverpool. Actually, no, it's 5-0 for City in that game. Liverpool come back, win the second leg in the Premier League, and then end the dreams of Manchester City in the Champions League. Well, the year following, it's a very tense Premier League going right down to literally inches as you have one shot for Sadio Mane go in. Oh, no, it's cleared off the line. And then Leroy
I think
Sané.
it was millimeters.
Millimeters,
actually,
really?
Darius. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, down to it.
We do metric over in the UK, but
Exactly.
yeah, inches is way too much considering how close that was to going in. John Stones, City
John
legend,
Stones
just for
cleaning
that
it off
moment.
the line. And Leroy Sané getting the winning goal in that match, and just 1 point separating the teams in that season 2018-19. And then last year, Liverpool and City, well, you got one end controversy. Could have been a handball, maybe on one side. On the other side, Fabinho sends in a top shelf strike, and Liverpool off and running in a 3-1 win at Anfield. Never quite looked back to the rest of the Premier League from there. So here we are, Liverpool and City, two teams that have been the standard in the Premier League over the last few seasons. So before we get into the X's and O's, just from an irrational standpoint of a fan, has this been a matchup where you go in dreading it? Do you hate Liverpool? Do you kind of think of it as just another game? Where do you stand as a City fan looking at Liverpool?
So it's a really interesting question, because had you asked me this question 4 years ago, my answer would be completely different. And that doesn't really have to do with Liverpool's challenging of City and the ups and downs that both teams have had in recent years, and the battles, especially as you mentioned in 2018-19. It does for me come down to the fans. And you mentioned that Champions League quarterfinal in 2017-18. For me, I wouldn't really call it a rivalry. I would kind of call it more bad blood that was initially driven by a small group of Liverpool fans, but then spread to both groups. City and Liverpool fans used to be on pretty good terms. We had this common enemy, especially in the first, exactly. In the first 20 years of the Premier League. I mean, Liverpool were up there with the teams that I enjoyed watching. My dad took me to a Liverpool Wimbledon game in '96 at Anfield, and I think Jamie Redknapp got both goals. But it was really fun to be at Anfield and see the Kop and all that kind of stuff. And I recall kind of hoping that Liverpool would win in Istanbul in 2005 and really enjoying that comeback. But I think, speaking about that Champions League game in 2017-18, that small minority of fans that threw projectiles at the City bus and the players' bus and basically destroyed it, made it, they had to get a different bus out of Anfield after that defeat. I think that was the kind of catalyst and the spark for what everything is now between those two sets of fans. And from a City perspective, City fans thought that was very downplayed the attack on the bus. And I think had it happened in reverse, there would have been a lot more outcry in the media, in the UK at least, because that it is so Liverpool dominated, or ex-Liverpool player dominated, or was back then at least. So I think it comes down to that kind of petty fan rivalry, not even rivalry, just like dislike. And that's what it comes down to. And the refusal on both sides to kind of see eye to eye and just call past indiscretions and move on.
Right. Well, I mean, there's so many things that go into that. It's not just the fact that it's Liverpool and City, the football teams. It's Manchester and Liverpool, just a natural rivalry there that's been going for, what's that been, over 100 years. So you've got that playing in. Okay,
not just down to football as well.
Not just down to football, obviously down to politics, down to the way that the cities are literally built. You have a lock system to get the river around, so you can get ships into Manchester, and the fact that city,
ship canal.
Yeah, you got the ship canal, and you literally have the logo. It almost feels like a troll to Liverpool to have that being the logo, but of course, no, that is such a big part of the economy of Manchester. But sticking to football, that pettiness kind of came up after City wins the title in the 2018-19 season. Going back on the plane after winning the title, you hear them singing a version of Ale Ale Ale, but taking kind of a pot shot at Liverpool. Now, for you, in that kind of nature of pettiness, are you just like, you know what, Liverpool fans, y'all kind of earned this one? Or was that like, it's kind of weird hearing the players get on like that?
So I don't think that the players and the club should have necessarily been responding in that way, because regardless of the context and what City fans were singing about, it was for the players to take that on and start singing it made it a bigger thing, and made people question it more than I think had been beforehand. I think that there were allegations that City fans were singing about Sean Cox in that, the fan who was injured.
And I think that's the point that people get upset about. But I mean, I do want to kind of like take a little bit of pressure off you. I'm not asking you to speak on people talking about things that are completely off the table, but let's say more just like the banter of Liverpool living rent free in the City players' heads, that you win the title and we're going to sing about Liverpool, not necessarily the specific lines themselves of that song that we can all say are pretty distasteful.
I think a lot of it comes down to Raheem Sterling, and you know the way that he has grown since becoming a City player, since leaving Liverpool for City. The reaction from Liverpool legends in the British media following that move was that Sterling was greedy, that he was a snake for betraying Liverpool, that Jordan Ibe was going to be better than Raheem Sterling ever would be. And so, you know, every time Raheem Sterling went back to Anfield after that, it was kind of relentless booing and targeting and things like that. And that kind of extended in some respects to England when he played for England as well. And the way that he's overcome that has been fantastic. And so there is a line in that song about Sterling won the double and Liverpool won F all. And I think that is, for me, I think that is the crux of the song, is like it's supporting Raheem, validating his decision to come to City despite all the flack that he got for making that move, which at the time, where those clubs were in 2015-16, that was a pretty solid move for Raheem. It would be another couple of years before Liverpool were challenging in Europe again. And so I think, as I said, I think it was stupid of the players to sing it, but I can also understand why they did it. And that banter side of it is in kind of support and protection of their teammate, rather than Liverpool are living rent-free in our heads at that point, because there had been so much talk about that 2018-19 season being the season that Liverpool would come back and win it, and because of that, I think City's achievement of winning the last 14 games straight in the Premier League, which is, when you're being chased all the way by a team 1 point behind you, is a phenomenal achievement, especially after a 100-point season the season before that. So I think it does sadden me that it seems to be like one has to be terrible and one has to be great, because I think Liverpool and City are actually two very, very, very good teams, but in completely different ways. And we should be appreciating that rather than kind of always looking to kind of dump on one another, because that's what the nature of, I guess, Twitter is these days.
I think there are people who will just say, oh, well, that's banter culture. But at the same time, if it goes below the belt, and for most of us, we understand when that line is crossed, that's when it can be, okay, now this is personal. But as far as just the two fan bases go, I still don't see it as being completely toxic. I think there's still a lot more of it it's hyper sensitive because the teams themselves are so good. If this were a middle table rivalry, I don't see this being nearly as what it can be at times.
Yeah, I can take that point in terms of where the two clubs are and what the two clubs are trying to achieve, for sure. And I would definitely create a separation between what I've experienced this side of the Atlantic with what I've experienced in the UK, and the just how tribal being a football fan can be in England, and what it means, and kind of the micro xenophobia that goes on between people who live 30 miles away from each other. It's kind of laughable in some ways, but it is kind of serious for so many people, and can be, quite scary at times. I've been at games where it's like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to come out of this without having to visit the ER, but we'll see. And so it is that tribalness, and the fact that the fans always have to be sitting separately, I think speaks to that as well.
Well, I mean, here we have it in American sports, of course, like in the NFL. I'm a Philadelphia sports fan. So the Philadelphia Eagles, you always hear that they're the worst. They throw batteries. And a lot of times these types of reputations are earned. But it's usually, like, as you said at the beginning, it's usually a minority of fans who are doing these kinds of egregiously terrible acts. But, like, let's get back to something a little happier, right? So you being a Manchester City fan, you are not one of these Johnny-come-latelys. You weren't sitting there waiting on Sheikh Mansour and saying, oh, that's going to be my team now. You've been a Manchester City fan your entire life. So can you kind of take me through what made you a Manchester City fan, and how that's kind of developed down the years?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you grow up in Greater Manchester and your father supports one team or the other, you don't really have a choice in the matter. In previously, I've said it's like religion, but you can change religions relatively easily. It's more like a blood type, in terms of it's so embedded in your family's makeup, if you're blue or if you're red, if you are a football family in Manchester. And so my dad was a season ticket holder for years at City. He would follow them home and away. Both he and my mum worked in the ticket office at Maine Road, and would, my dad would kind of drop my mum off at his mother's and then go and watch the games. And I was like 2 or 3 weeks old, all that kind of stuff. And so I was just brought up in this incredibly City rich environment in the late 80s, early 90s. And so it wasn't really a choice for me whether or not I supported City or not. It was how much I was going to support City, and I just kind of fully bought into it, which is strange because my school days coincided with City's worst times and also United's glory days. So being a City fan in Greater Manchester in 1990s and 2000s was not an especially fun experience for me, but very character forming for sure. And yeah, I remember kind of being hooked from the first couple of games that I went to. I became a season ticket holder in 97, 98, which was the season we were relegated from Division 1 to Division 2, what is now the Championship, to League 1. And then, so yeah, my first like 5 seasons as a City fan were relegation, promotion, relegation, promotion. And then we stayed in the Premier League. And that was my first 5 seasons as a City fan, which was, an incredible whirlwind experience. And I'm sure I'm older for it right now. Like, I've aged beyond my time, because every season was just so nerve-wracking. But yeah, I think my first game was 92. It was against Sheffield Wednesday or United. My dad and I can never figure it out. City won. I know that much. We scored more than 1 goal. And the only reason I remember that is because I was 4 or 5 at the time, and my mum had warned my dad that I might not be super interested the whole game.
90 minutes.
Yeah. It's a lot for a child with very short attention span. So my dad brought plenty of snacks, including cookies, but we call them biscuits in England. And he said, when we score, you can have a biscuit. And so about halfway through the first half, City scored, and the whole stadium jumps up, apart from the away fans, obviously, go yes, and I'm like, biscuit. So that's been a bit of a feature on our podcast now and again. We've contemplated kind of having a biscuit of the month competition, and as in, like, a biscuit is like a particularly sweet goal that you see, and so. It's since then I've been pretty much hooked, and even since moving to the US in 2014, I've tried to kind of stay as much in touch with City as I can. When I go back over to Manchester, I go to as many games as I can while I'm there. I went to the Manchester Derby in Houston, Texas a few years ago, and watched Phil Foden make his City debut, which was a lot of fun as well. So
no, do we want that every month? Like, well, because for me, like, the Champions League, it's a spectacle. There's X amount of games, but it's if we get 5-star food every day of the week, it's like, okay, is there 6-star food?
Yeah, no, exactly. It loses its value to
you,
because you eat this all the time.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so, like, it's hard to get up for the crowd to get up when Real Madrid comes, because Bayern Munich was here last week, Barcelona was here the week before. What do we care? You know what I mean? Not what do we care, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, but that being said, that if you told me, Liverpool and Bayern Munich are playing in Tokyo, Japan, I have to be honest and say, the people over there, they're gonna love it. They're gonna make a fortune. You're gonna make tons of people happy, of course. But
believe me.
So what, are we gonna turn European football into the Harlem Globetrotters, where they're just sitting up?
No. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, like, I look at them, I'm like, oh, that's cool for them too. But at the same time, no, it's not good for us as consumers.
If it's not at Anfield and it's not at Camp Nou, it's shit. It's stupid. It's lost.
It's an exhibition at that point.
It's lost
like
the whole
the
part
McDonald's. It's the globalization of this product. It's the McDonaldization.
You don't go to watch the Knicks play at Rucker Park. You go to watch them play. Hold
on. You don't go to watch them.
I was gonna say, you don't go to watch the Knicks.
I don't know.
Just Madison Square Garden was in my head. But
yeah, no, like, it was said best in the movie The Incredibles. If everyone is special, no one is special. And that's the thing. One of the things about the Champions League is it's the rarity to see Liverpool and Bayern at Anfield. It's the rarity.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But you certainly have to have a sense of humor to be a City fan, or used to at least.
Well, used to. Now it's the incredible highs. So let's get to the football as we take a look at the guys who are bringing the biscuits for City this season and, well, into the future. So with the front line, the attack for Manchester City, that's been the big talking point, of course, over the last few years, just because it's so fun to watch. Kun Aguero, he's struggling with a little bit of injury right now. And I think the thought for a lot of outsiders, kind of outside looking in, is, oh, well, they've just got Gabi Jesus, you toss him in, and then Foden and Sterling, and it's all good. But the attack hasn't been as easygoing and as straightforward as one might think. How would you kind of characterize the way that the attack has been set up throughout the course of this season so far?
Well, I'd start by saying that it's a very strange season. You know, even after Project Restart, that the whole kind of scenario is very unusual. We're seeing kind of incredible results. You know, United losing 6-1 at home to Spurs, then half an hour later, Liverpool 7-2. Lose 7-2 at Villa. Had to bring that up, obviously. But you know, City losing 5-2 at home to well, we lost 3-0 on penalties. It was a 2-2 draw, but we lost 3-0 on penalties because we conceded 3 penalties in one game. Typical City. But we're seeing so many weird results that, and I would count these kind of 1-0 wins that City seem to keep dragging out of opposition to be among them. And a lot of that is down to, I think, energy conservation. If you get caught any of City and Marseille in the Champions League last week, that was probably our best performance of the season. We had a great performance away at Burnley in the League Cup. We seem to be saving those kind of attacking, high energy performances for European and domestic cup competitions. And Guardiola has gone on record on a number of occasions to say how tired the players are in terms of, you know, I think City got 3 or 4 weeks break, which isn't really a break, between their Champions League quarterfinal exit and their first Premier League game. And there's no preseason there, but you still have to maintain match fitness for that entire time pretty much. And so, you know, with the internationals that were happening then as well, we're in a strange situation where we're seeing more and more injuries, and Liverpool are definitely feeling that more than most this year. Although I will say that most of your players were incredibly good with injuries for the last 2 seasons.
Decently fortunate. But I mean, yeah, everyone has been suffering through, of course, City. I mean, losing Kevin De Bruyne at times in the last couple of years.
I mean,
tons of these teams have been dealing with it.
Laporte was out for most of last season. And yeah, there's just so many injuries that we, you know, Ben Mendy's never fit. Not that he necessarily adds anything to our team now, but you know, Leroy Sané getting injured at the start of last season, so we didn't have any of him for he probably would have gone to Bayern for a lot more money in August of last year after the Community Shield. But yeah, and I think speaking of Sané and returning to kind of the topic of the attack, I think Sané was definitely somebody who brought something different to our attack. He was someone who we always seemed to play against Liverpool because he was able to exploit the high line that you guys play and get in behind Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I think has been exposed defensively on a few occasions by a few teams since then. Offensively, he's fantastic, but I think he's more of a right wing back than a right back. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but
he can easily be a midfielder, but he definitely plays more as an old school winger as opposed to being, when you think of the modern right back, you would say like an Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He's not as good defensively, but of course that means that the other guy on the other side has to be as adept to bombing up and down the wing to be able to keep with him. So, but to your point, yes, there's been quite a bit of turnover and guys coming in, guys going out with the attack for Manchester City. So you brought up Leroy Sané. I mean, what are kind of your thoughts on what happened with Sané? Was it just he couldn't stay fit? Was he not a right fit for Manchester City, or was it just as simple as he wanted to go back to Bayern? I mean, why is he left at the summer?
Well, he was definitely in the last year of his contract, and so City wanted to get something for him. And by that time, he had made the decision that he wanted to go to Bayern. He still has family in Germany, and I get that, and I respect that. And I think Sane is the anomaly in terms of players that City have been kind of forced to let go in their prime, and I think he also was very hot and cold. There are certain teams that he wasn't very good against teams who would come and low block, and he wasn't as. I don't think he pressed as much as Guardiola or even a Klopp as well would want, and that's a huge part of City's game, especially in the big games. And so I'm really excited by the signing of Ferran Torres, whose City career has got off to a pretty good start in terms of his goals and assists already. He is someone who offers that something different. He's playing centre forward a lot for us at the moment because we don't have anybody else there.
That's not the long-term plan. He's just kind of a plug-and-play guy at centre forward, yeah?
Yeah, I think his long-term is going to be him on the right, okay. Raheem Sterling on the left, Foden, De Bruyne in behind a classic number 9.
I think they're still going to look for a number 9 then going forward?
Yeah. I think Sergio Aguero's fitness issues are going to certainly force City's hand in that.
And Jesus.
The whole mess. Yeah. Gabriel Jesus is his best games for us have been at like left wing back in a weird way. Like he played his best 2 games for us, I would say, would be the Real Madrid games in the last 16 of the Champions League last season, where his pressing, he's the best presser in our team, bar none. And so he will always be in Guardiola's good books for that. That being said, I think if the right offer came in for him and City had, if City could get Haaland, I think we would snap him up in a second. I think we would bypass our regular kind of reluctance to pay really, really top dollar. City's record signing is Ruben Dias, 65 million, and the kind of money that Haaland would demand would be way more than that. And so
you say he'd be absolutely worth it.
I think that guy's a goal machine, and I think depending on who City bring in to replace Pep, if they do bring in someone to replace him next season, that will be the key to that. The Haaland family has history at City, which is, I think, a positive thing in our favor. His Erling Haaland's dad was our captain for a couple of seasons, and so we have that maybe on our side, but it's very much not City's regular strategy to go after the most in-demand players. We kind of go for that tier below, and that's when Kevin De Bruyne was signed by City for 50-something million, he was called the ex-Chelsea flop, and it's no one's saying that anymore.
Well, there's so many superstars who are ex-Chelsea flops. I mean, you just look at Liverpool with Mohamed Salah, so they're all over the place apparently.
Exactly, and so I think the attack, I think, will grow as this season continues. As long as we have one number 9, even if it means Leon Delap coming back in, youth prospects. Shout out to the City under 18s today who won the Youth FA Cup this afternoon against Chelsea. Fantastic 3-2 win. But there are so many players coming through that academy as well that we are spoiled for choice offensively, but it's defensively that I'm very pleased with our transfer activity in the last couple of seasons. I think Ruben Dias is a fantastic partner for Aymeric Laporte, and we now have depth in that position as well. I'd like to see John Stones play more. I think he's a very, very good defender on his day. He just doesn't get enough days to show that. Nathan Ake was a fantastic signing from Bournemouth, can play left back. I think he will play left back against Liverpool on Sunday. I think he'll get some game time tomorrow against Olympiacos to get match fitness back, and he'll play against Salah on Sunday. Rodri coming into his own in that central defensive midfield position. Difficult to replace Fernandinho, who was quietly the best in that position. in that kind of midfield for a long time in the Premier League. And yeah, my player of the season for City so far is Kyle Walker, who's been incredible. Scored a beauty.
The screamer just at the weekend.
Yeah, but that's not a part of his game that we normally rely on. But I think he will eventually become a centre half as well. I think Gareth Southgate has used him in the England setup in that role on a number of occasions, and I think Pep is realizing that City have been very, very susceptible to the counter attack in recent seasons, and so his pace for 31, 32 is still remarkable. So I'm glad to see that he's still doing well. So I'm really pleased with City's squad at the moment. I think we need a striker. I think we need a left back. But then if you look at the age profile of the squad, the academy prospects who are coming through, I think once those two positions are sorted, I think City will definitely be not very active in the transfer market going forward.
Right, so let's stick with the defense. I mean, I did want to get to the midfield, but we can come back to the center of the park. So looking at the defenders, of course, when people want to give Manchester City some stick, talk about the fact that they've spent so much on the defense over the last few years, and that's been looked at as the Achilles heel for the squad. But as you mentioned, a lot of depth for City now at the back. Do you feel like Pep is comfortable with where they are with their squad depth at defense, or do they still kind of need to figure it out? Because it still seems like week to week, you never really quite know who's going to be back there, do you?
No, and some of that is injuries as well. You know, Aymeric Laporte did have that huge knee injury that I mentioned earlier last season, and that has, I think, any knock that he gets, City are very cautious about bringing him back on a slow timetable to make sure that the knee is strong enough each time to come back and play. But yeah, I think that centre half partnership of Dias and Laporte is, on paper and based on what we've seen so far, the strongest partnership in the league in terms of leadership. I would say. I look at, you could argue Van Dijk is certainly the highest profile centre half in the Premier League, and was definitely the best centre half in the Premier League last season. Bit of a shaky start to this season before.
It was a bad start. You can be honest.
Not
up to his normal.
But I think that this is the nature of football today, is that like we start to question that kind of thing based on a few
isolated incidents compared
to incidents,
an incredible standard.
Yeah. And what I kind of always, the drum that I beat on Maine Road Ramble is that City have never really been set up to be a defensive team. The whole kind of setup of City is to create as many chances as possible in a game. And if we converted the chances that we shouldn't lose any games. We create a ridiculous number of chances. We're just pretty terrible at finishing them off, which is why we need a striker. And it's the number of chances we create is insane compared to the number of goals that we score, and we score a decent number of goals, generally speaking. But we miss penalties. We had a period where we missed like 4 penalties in a row last season, and it's those kinds of moments that cost you titles and cost you title challenges. It's those kinds of moments where things are won and lost, and Liverpool had all of those things in their favor last season. They would get last minute winner after last minute winner, and it wasn't that you were blowing teams out very often at all. You were eking out victories, 2-1, 1-0, 3-2, and City were kind of drawing a game 2-2, but then winning 7-0 the next week. It's the consistency in being able to score on a regular basis that separated Liverpool and City last season. And
yeah,
that's what I believe anyway.
Well, no, and it's just funny to hear you mention we need a number 9. We need to get a true striker in there. Liverpool fans have been saying the same thing. It's always funny for these teams at the top it's never to a point where it's like, all right, the squad's good enough, we're good. You're always going to have that insatiable appetite of, well, we could improve this, we can improve that. So it is funny for me to hear you say the same thing, because you're literally saying the same thing that Liverpool fans have been saying, like, oh, well, Salah, I don't know, he's a decent finisher, not good enough. Of course, to rival fans, that sounds absolutely ludicrous. But when you watch your guys week in and week out, you kind of get that different perspective than others will have.
I can also see where you're coming from too. It's not necessarily that City need a Haaland. Haaland is the dream, right? But City need a Haaland type of player. They need someone who is tall, who is physical, who can offer just a different dynamic to the 5'3" guys who do all the fancy stuff faster than anybody else, but then can't get on the end of their head of like a perfect cross from Kevin De Bruyne because they don't have the height. Same thing with Trent Alexander-Arnold, I imagine. The number of balls that come in, that if you had someone who was 6'4",
not a target man in there, exactly.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So, yeah, I think it's I can see why we kind of feel like we have similar problems, but maybe both teams just don't play that way, and we just want them to, because that's the kind of Route 1 football that we were used to.
I think at the end of the day, as long as you're getting the wins, the fans are going to have less to gripe about. As soon as it becomes a 2-1 win, or it's a little hairy, or a draw, or then a 7-2 loss, then blow the whole thing up. Klopp is an idiot. Pep doesn't know what he's talking about. Fire him, get him out. Everyone panics, but that's the nature of fandom. All right, well, we did kind of skip the midfield. Let's go back into the midfield for a bit. Mm-hmm. So for you, what is the best midfield that City could throw out there on a regular basis if everyone were healthy? Because I think, at least for us outside looking in, we have kind of a lot of questions about, well, who really is an attacking mid versus a winger? Is Foden going to be playing up front in the front three, or is he attacking mid, or do you put him on the right? Where does Mahrez factor into this? De Bruyne, mm-hmm. How do you track him? So what is your preferred midfield? If, say, you're going to 4-3-3 midfield 3.
Well, that's the assumption that everybody makes.
I think that is the assumption that we make. Yes,
because Pep has played a 4-3-3 forever. Klopp has played a 4-3-3 for most of his time during the Premier League. But I think, especially for games against Liverpool, that the formation does need to take a little tweaking, and it might look like a 4-3-3. But it's a double pivot, so it's a 4-2-1-3 rather than a 4-1-2-3. But for me, I like Bernardo Silva's energy. He covers more ground than any other player when he's on the pitch, and I think in those big games where the midfield is so often, especially against Liverpool, they love to bypass the midfield completely. Basically, Trent and Robertson just like to keep the ball between themselves just by spraying 50-yard passes across the pitch to each other. That seems to be like Liverpool do seem to be very Route 1 in terms of they wait for their opposition to make an error in their third, and then they counter attack with ridiculous energy and pace. And I think City need to be very aware of that, which is why Kyle Walker definitely needs to play. It's why we need to maybe have Ake play at left back so that we're more defensive minded in that area as well. I would love to see. I can give you my preferred lineup for Sunday.
Let's go for it. Let's go for your
starting. That might be the easiest way to do it. So Ederson in goal, because he's our only fit senior keeper. Zach Steffen and Scott Carson are both injured. So we had to call up the youth team keeper, who should have been playing tonight for City in the FA Cup Youth Final, but is instead back at the Etihad, waiting to be on the bench against Olympiacos, because he's the literally only other fit keeper that we have who has actually played a game for City, I think. So Ederson in goal, back four of Walker, Diaz, Laporte, Ake, sitting two of Rodri, who will do most of the sitting, and Bernardo, who will kind of be a bit more flexible. I would then have, this is based on neither Gabriel Jesus or Sergio Aguero being fit.
Okay.
And so De Bruyne and Foden kind of floating around. So it sounds more like a 4-4-2, but it's more like a
4-2-4,
I guess.
Right.
But that 4 is just so fluid that there isn't really a designated striker in there. But yeah, I'd play Foden. Who do I have? Foden, Torres, and I think I said Sterling.
Sterling in. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sterling and Torres are the two more forward advanced players, and then.
But Foden, if Jesus is fit, I play Jesus over Sterling just because it's Liverpool, and Sterling seems to have a bit of a block against Liverpool.
Well, there's no fans there, and this is at the Etihad, remember. So if it were at Anfield, night, tons of fans, maybe, but Sterling did get off the schneid, got his first against Liverpool in the last matchup at the Etihad. So ride the hot hand. I don't know.
Scored in the Community Shield against you as well,
and the Community Shield. Don't forget. The all-important Community Shield. So as we take a look at kind of what's going to go for this game, before we get to a true prediction, just what does the game plan look like for City to come away with 3 points against Liverpool?
Take your chances. And that goes for any City game. Starting fast, pressing well, getting an early goal, and then following that up and capitalizing on your chances after that, because when City get one, they'll normally then create a number of other chances straight after that, and that is the zone. If City score soon after, they'll win. If City don't score soon after, that's when the doubt starts to creep in and the opposition starts to get more into the game. Save your first shot on target as well. The number of times that City just dominate, and the first shot the opposition have on target goes in is I could, if I had a dollar for every time that happened, I could probably quit my job. Maybe not quite that much, but it feels like that much as a fan. So just take your chances and don't overcommit to attacks as well. You don't need to fill that space. And you don't need to fill the box, because we're not big enough to be challenging the height that Liverpool have at the back. So why crowd that area and risk the counter attack? So yeah, just take your chances basically and keep it tight.
All right. Well, Jon, as we wrap up, give me your score prediction for Sunday, and then I'm going to tell you why you're wrong.
Okay. I'm normally very reasonable with my score prediction.
Reasonable or pessimistic? Because those are.
I think I'm pretty reasonable. I'm pretty rational about it. But there is, as a diehard, lifelong City fan, there is definitely that sense of how are City going to snatch defeat from jaws of victory this time. I like my heart says it'll be like 3-1 City, but my head says 2-2. So, probably 2-1 City on that basis then.
That is spoken like a true lifelong City fan, because I'm expecting you to come up with, it's going to be 4-0, Virgil van Dijk's out, we're going to take them and run roughshod. But I think those are very fair, as you mentioned, very fair analysis of what the game should be. The way I'm kind of looking at it, the only reason why I do feel pretty good for Liverpool going in, they're starting to get healthier, not just at the back, but Thiago Alcantara. You mentioned that Liverpool have kind of bypassed the midfield altogether. Well, with Thiago in there, Liverpool have seen an uptick in chances, the way that they controlled the game against Chelsea and the way they controlled against Everton, even though that ends up being a draw. Liverpool have seen kind of a new revelation come into the midfield. So I'm really interested to seeing how that battle plays out. But I think 2-2, that's probably a good way to go. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if this ends up being like the crap 0-0 we saw at Anfield a couple years ago, missed penalty at the end or something stupid like that, where the two teams are just kind of boxers filling each other out.
Well, yeah, but it could be a really strange result, because in some respects, this isn't as important a game, I don't think, as it has been in past years, simply because this season both teams are going to drop points in games that you don't expect them to, just because of the nature of how weird. And if half your team is out with because they're quarantining because of COVID, then you're gonna lose to a Leicester or a I don't know, even a Villa. Well, that's maybe more Liverpool than City.
Well, maybe more Liverpool than City, but then Leeds will be coming for you next time around too.
Yeah, well, I mean,
there's never a day off in the Prem. I think we can all always agree to that.
It's true. Very, very strong league, and I'm excited. Well, I'm kind of excited and nervous for Sunday. I speak for both of us when I say I think we'd probably both take a draw if it was offered to us now.
100%.
Just to be like, okay, we neither of us need a defeat to the other at this stage in the season. It's less about the points and more about the psychology, I think, at this point.
I don't think there's ever been a 0-0 that I would take more than this game upcoming, because the worst thing that can happen is that City go smash Liverpool and kick on. Of course, if Liverpool do the opposite, well, you don't really feel like City are going to go away. But we will, of course, see as this season shakes out. Well, Jon, really appreciate you joining us here on Tampa Bay Cop Talk tonight for Rambling Rivals. Your podcast is Maine Road Ramble, but do you have anything else going on in the works outside of the podcast that you'd like to promote?
No, I mean, I'm just a pretty sad person, really. I guess I just do my podcast.
Just talk football and enjoy life.
I talk football. I play soccer with my 2-year-old daughter, and that's very important, don't get me wrong, but it's that's life in COVID Massachusetts at the moment. And so that's what I'm happy and I'm healthy and I'm okay with that. So but if anyone has a podcasting job they want to offer me, I'd be very interested to talk to you about it. Only if you're going to pay me that.
Yeah, of course. Got to get your agent on the phone.
We are at Maine Road Ramble on Twitter, and so you can follow us there. You can subscribe to us. We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify. I think we're in a ton of other places as well, but those are the two places that I listen to my podcasts. We might start doing a YouTube thing soon. I'll see if I can talk to the other guys about it. Maybe after they see this, they'll either love it or they'll be like, "No, we're never doing anything like that." We'll see how my performance is rated by the Maine Road Ramble Slack channel later on.
I don't know. I think you put in a man of the match type performance. I do really appreciate your time, Jon. Fans, thank you for joining us. And hopefully for Jon's sake, it's a decent game, but not too good of a game. Liverpool take 3 points against City at the weekend.
All right. Come on, City.